Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of our introduction to Islamic manuscript culture. I'm glad to see that you survived the first day and you're ready for more. We're going to give our illustrious main speaker a bit of a break first thing this morning. Evan Kropp will not be speaking. Instead, we have the treat of hearing from two of the finest scholars in the UCLA Islamic Studies program and in their respective departments, Professor Lamia Balafrej and Professor Michael Cooperson. And to introduce our first speaker, we have the Director of the Islamic Studies program here, my colleague, Professor in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures, Asma Saeed.
Good morning. It's really wonderful to see so many of you back for day 2. So I want to take a few minutes before introducing Lamia Balafrej to talk just a little bit about this broader initiative involving Islamic manuscripts at UCLA, and to thank in particular Luke Yarborough for his efforts in organizing this workshop. The prelude, or let's say the spark, for this year's efforts was actually a 3-day workshop last February that was in which the Islamic Studies program hosted Dr. Khalid Zahri. He's Assistant Director for the Khizan al-Hassaniya in Rabat, Morocco. And in addition to giving a wonderful talk on imagery, color, and symbolism in Maghribi manuscripts, Dr. Zahri offered 2 days of intensive training sessions, primarily for our graduate students, so one-on-one small group training sessions at YRL and special collections. And the event really affirmed for me the tremendous potential of using our manuscripts, our Islamic manuscripts here at YRL, and the importance of making this resource more widely available. Inspired by the success of his visit and in my usual bursts of enthusiasm, which I have every so often every year, I put Islamic Manuscript Workshop Part 2 at the very top of my to-do list for this academic year. And that was back in February 2018. By July 2018, and that's when Professor Yarborough moved in, arrived at UCLA, the item had been relegated to something like 50 or maybe 100 on my to-do list, and I had lost all hope of ever getting to it. And typically, in their first year, faculty members are excused from service and administration. But Luke was very persistently generous in offering his help, and I immediately saw that his expertise and interests were very well suited for taking this item off my plate and putting it on his, which I very promptly did. And I recall that I said to him, I have absolutely no bandwidth for planning another workshop, but I'd love to find a way to make this a tradition at UCLA. So if you want to take it on, it's all yours. And I've used this same language with a number of other people, and I've never heard from them after that. But I have to say that Professor Yarborough stayed with it. Since then, it has been entirely his initiative, his careful planning, his collaborative outreach that has made this event, I mean, it's at a completely different scale from what we did last year, and it's made it possible this year. Going forward, we envision that with the support and help of partners such as the Center for Near Eastern Studies, Ali Behdad has been an important partner in this venture this year, special collections at YRL, California Rare Books School, and others. And thanks to this wonderful resource that we have here at UCLA, I do think that UCLA is very well positioned to become a leading center in research and training in Islamic manuscripts. We hope that the effort this year will become part of a sunnah of annual Islamic paleography and codicology workshops at UCLA. This will allow us to continue to offer training, greater access and visibility for our collections, and a space for building a community and a network for those interested in the subfield. As Professor Yarborough mentioned, we are in the midst of other development initiatives, and we hope these will lead to funding for cataloging and digitization and for training of graduate students and researchers. So please do stay tuned for more. As the director of the Interdisciplinary Islamic Studies program, I've really had the privilege of working with a huge number of faculty across departments and divisions here at UCLA. And I mean, they have a variety of talents and expertises. And what I've noticed is that just within the past few years, we finally reached a critical mass of faculty who are not only passionate about Islamic manuscripts, but who themselves have the expertise to guide those of us who are dilettantes. So this team, as it were, includes Michael Cooperson, of course, and Luke Yarbrough. I think that this is my way of recruiting them to be a part of this team. And also one of our newer faculty members, Lamia Balafrej, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce her today. She specializes in the arts of the classical and early modern Islamic world. Her interests include painting and the arts of the book, codicology and paleography, intersections of materiality and aesthetic, art and its relation to labor and ecology and cross-cultural exchange. And she's published numerous articles in all of these areas. Her first book, The Making of the Artist in Late Timurid Painting, which is soon to be published with Edinburgh University Press, explores the fascinating question of artists and their understanding of authorship and artistic authority in Persian paintings. Having had the privilege of very recently reading the proofs, I can confirm that the work makes an exciting and provocative contribution to our understanding of artists and their self-expression in early modern Islam. Her work has been supported by grants and fellowships from various institutions, including the Forum for Transregional Studies in Berlin, the Marion and Jasper Whiting Foundation, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Smithsonian Institution. Before joining us at UCLA, she taught at Wellesley College. So please join me in welcoming Lamia Balafrej, who will speak about visual and artistic elements in Islamic manuscripts at UCLA.
Let's see. I think it's working. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Esma, for such a generous introduction. And thank you, Luke, for organizing the workshop and for inviting me this morning. And thank you all for being here. I'm really delighted to be in a room that's full of people interested in Islamic manuscripts. This is a rare occasion, so thank you all for being here. Thank you very much, Courtney, for bringing all this material, these 3 manuscripts that I will be talking about this morning. So what I'm going to do this morning is just share some of the questions that art historians might ask when they approach Islamic manuscripts, right? And the question of how art historians can infer historical meaning from looking at codicological features, including visual and artistic features. So I will proceed in 3 parts. First of all, I'll talk about illustrations because, as some of you might know, most scholarship in Islamic art history has dealt with illustrated manuscripts. That is to say, manuscripts that contain paintings, paintings that illustrate portions of the text contained in manuscripts, right? And so they have attended to those paintings and to the relationship between the paintings and the text included in the manuscript. So I'll talk about that in the first part while using our dear Cindy Bed, the face of this workshop. I could not talk about this manuscript, so I will use that manuscript to talk about illustrations, painting. In the second part, however, I would like to move away from illustration and painting to look at the ways in which art historians can assign meaning to features other than figurative representation. That is to say, what art historical meaning can be given to aspects such as the format of the book or the shape of a script. And I will do that using a Persian manuscript of the Halname. And in my third part, if I have time, and it will be very brief, I will talk about art and science and ask whether or not and to what extent and how art historians can approach scientific manuscripts, because so far they've mainly dealt with literary manuscript when it comes to Islamic manuscripts. And my question will be, what can we do as art historians with scientific manuscripts in the sense of, to what extent can the study of Islamic manuscripts from the medieval and early modern period, which is my period, help us say something about the divide or challenge the divide of art and science when it comes to Islamic manuscripts of that period. So in any case, illustrated manuscripts, that's my first part. So as I was saying, art historians have looked at what they call cycles of illustrations. That is to say, they have looked at how certain texts, major texts of the canon of Arabic and Persian and Turkish and so on literatures, they have looked at how those texts have been illustrated through time in various contexts, and they have looked at how images were used to emphasize certain portions of the text and why and in what social and political context. And there has been a lot of work done already on the cycles of illustrations and the illustrated manuscripts of major texts in Arabic, for example, Kalila wa Dimna or Maqamat. In Persian, obviously, the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, the Book of Kings. It's a whole genre in Islamic art history to write about illustrations of the Shahnameh. Other examples include the Khamsa of Nizami, the Khamsa of Amir Khosrow, and so on and so forth. Now, what I wanted to say here is that the word illustration might be a little bit misleading, because these paintings that we talk about as Islamic art historians are not simply passive ways of visualizing a pre-given text that's included in a manuscript. Actually, one has to think of these paintings as acts of interpretation. These paintings illustrate portions of the text. They illustrate certain stories at the expense of others. They emphasize certain themes at the expense of others. And in doing so, they foreground certain readings of the text. So these paintings are actually very useful for literary historians, I believe, because they do speak to the reception, to the circulation of text and to the reception of text and to the interest of the historical audiences that commissioned those manuscripts. I could also talk about style and all of that, but for the purpose of this workshop, I really wanted to emphasize this idea of text and image relationship and this idea of the image as an active device of interpreting text, to the extent that obviously any image exceeds a text. It is different from a text, but in this case, images often do not simply passively represent or illustrate a text, but they interpret a text. They sometimes even misrepresent text. They divert text, and they present a certain image of the text in a particular context. So this work has been done, as I was saying, for major texts of the canon that have been illustrated in the Islamic world. But for this particular manuscript that I wanted to look at with you today, and again, I've only looked at this, I think, twice and very quickly. And as we all know by now, these manuscripts need a lot more critical study. But I'm very happy to look at this again with you all. So this is a tricky example, actually, because unlike manuscripts of Kalila wa Dimna and Maqamat and so on and so forth, that were quite numerous and widespread, even in their illustrated versions, this particular text, which is the text of the Tales of Sindibad al-Bahri, and so let me start. So هذه قصة السندباد البحري. This is the title. This is the first page of text. So unlike this very well-known text, this particular text, actually, its cycles of illustrations have not been studied. And to my knowledge, I've done just a little bit of research over the weekend. To my knowledge, I don't know of any other freestanding manuscript of this particular text that has illustrations. So it's very hard to say if there is a tradition. I doubt that there is one. We don't have comparative material. And to complicate things further, the manuscript is not dated. So I can't say much about the context of its making, the context of its production, but I will just simply, share some observations and some suggestions about its paintings. So this particular manuscript has 26 folios and 12 paintings according to the catalog. I mean, the catalog proposes a dating, dates the manuscript to the 20th century. I'm really unsure about that. It's probably not earlier than that. The content of I think you can read it's pretty legible. Can you all see it well? So as you can see from the presentation in red that gives the content of the manuscript, it's a copy of the tales of Sindibad al-Bahri wal Hindibad al-Barri. So basically, Hindibad al-Barri is hanging out in Baghdad under the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, as you can see from the first two lines of the text. And he walks by the house of Sindibad al-Bahri, and progressively they meet, and Sindibad al-Bahri starts telling him stories about his 7 voyages, extraordinary voyages that he performed in various seas of East Africa and South Asia and so on and so forth. So as I was saying, it's very hard to date this manuscript and to say much about the context of its production because we have no comparative material really, or at least I have not been able to find anything approaching this manuscript, whether in terms of style or content. There is also, I'm not clear, I really don't know, I realized that I didn't know anything about the tales of Sindibad al-Bahri. I've read all sorts of things online, probably unreliable things, relating the stories of Sindibad al-Bahri to Alf Layla wa Layla, the 1001 Nights, which I'm really not really that sure about. And in any case, in this manuscript, the text exists on its own without any reference to Alf Layla wa Layla. So it's very hard for all these reasons. I mean, even the text, and I believe Luke mentioned that yesterday, that even the text has yet to receive a sustained critical attention and a critical edition. So with all these difficulties in mind, I'm just gonna look at the paintings, and I would say just by looking briefly at the paintings over the weekend and yesterday, here's what I can say. What I can say is that there are 3 kinds of paintings in this manuscript. There is one kind of painting, so let's look at it. I'm gonna start leafing through. So in this 2 pages, they're meeting, and Sindibad starts telling his first story about his first trip, and this is the first painting. So basically, what Sindbad is talking about is his travels across seas with his fellow sailors, and they are basically island hopping, and they see this island in this particular tale. They see this island and they think it's nice and it looks quiet and pleasant, and so they decide to go and visit the island. But they soon realize that the island starts shaking. And in fact, they come to understand that the island is the back of a giant whale. Hence the painting. You see here, they started cooking and all of that, but they're only to realize, that they're actually on the top of a whale. So the painting is here titled, it's an image of the samaka, so the fish is mentioned, and it's also describing that people on top of the fish are cooking, and we also see el merkab, so the boat sailing on the sea. So this is the first painting, and I would say that this kind of painting is, again, I don't have any comparative example. I don't know of anything similar. And I would say that this kind of painting is really a narrative painting that emphasizes one particular moment in the story. It's a kind of painting that one might call a monoscenic painting, and it's rather idiosyncratic, and it's rather literal, I would say, as well. So that's the one kind of painting that one finds in this manuscript, is the kind of painting that emphasizes the rising action or the climax of the story, and so therefore presents, it's a kind of mnemonic image that presents readers and viewers with the main elements of the story, preparing them to understand or visualize the climax of the narrative. So that's one kind of image. But I was very intrigued by another kind of painting that one finds in here. So I'm gonna skip the second one. I have no idea how I'm doing with time. So this is another one emphasizing the story. And the other painting that I wanted to show is this one, which is also a narrative painting, and it illustrates a moment of one of the stories. And you see here Sindibad al-Bahri here. He's hanging, bound to the feet of the bird, which, as you can see from the title again of the image written in red, is the fabulous bird known as Ruh. And the bird is also carrying al-hayya, the serpent, in his minqar, in the beak. So in any case, what I think about these paintings is that actually, while some scholars say, and I've read a few things, really a couple of things about illustrations of Sindibad al-Bahri, and in fact, if there are no illustrations of any complete extant manuscript of Sindibad besides this example here, Sindibad al-Bahri, one can find illustrations or paintings that relate to stories from Sindibad al-Bahri in other manuscripts. I don't know if that's clear, but for example, one finds illustrations of stories that are similar to this one. So there might be intertextuality here at play, I'm not sure. But for example, in works of cosmography, and it is not unusual to find illustrations of the bird Ar-Ruh carrying a sailor, which is an image that, resonates with this particular tale here, in copies of Ajaib al-Makhluqat by Al-Qazwini, for example. So in other words, in this manuscript, we find idiosyncratic paintings, if you will, that illustrate specific moments of the story, but we also find paintings that engage other genres and thus testifies to the ways in which these tales have intersected in their reception with other kinds of writing, including works of cosmography. And there are other striking examples. So here there's a whole other story of the eagle and our Sindibad al-Bahri. And then what you see here, so obviously there is a lot of overlap between these tales and the genre of the Ajaib al-Makhluqat. But what you see here on this left page is an illustration of a legendary rhinoceros known as Al-Karkadan or Al-Karkadan in Ajaib al-Makhluqat, but also in this manuscript here. And this is one example of the kind of fabulous creatures that Sindibad encounters along the way while traveling. But again, we do find these same fabulous creatures illustrated in other cycles of illustrations that pertain to other texts, such as work of cosmography. So that's the second kind of image that I sort of see in this particular example. And then let me keep, so again, another example showing this fabulous creature of al-hayya, in the text, in the cosmographies, you have al-hayya, al-tinin, and so these illustrations illustrated with, resonate with all that imaginary. Again, Al-Hayya this time is looking at and threatening a Sindibad. And the last kind of image that I wanted to show you is this particular image here. It's Suratu Sheikh Rakib Sindibad. So basically he gets to another island. The island is really the privileged site for experiencing Ajab in this literature. So Sindibad is on this desert island, and he comes across this old man, and he decides to carry him on his shoulders, except that the old man turns out to be a complete bully, and he won't let go of a Sindibad, and so Sindibad has to carry him around, and he has to come up with a trick in order to get rid of the old man. And the trick is about it's quite complex. It's about making wine and having the sheikh drink the wine so that the sheikh loosens up and releases his grip from our hero Sindibad. In any case, it's an interesting image because I have found illustrations of a similar story, if not the same story. Again, this is something that I can't confirm, but this is an image that interestingly shows up in late medieval and early modern, rather, I think late medieval and early modern is correct, in manuscripts that contain works of divination, such as Falnames. So this is a kind of image that was used in other texts, in other contexts, and in particular in books of omens, in Falnames. So Falnames were books that are illustrated and had also text, and individuals would turn the page at random, and the fortune teller would comment upon the image to give insight about the future of that particular individual. So this is an image that shows up in that kind of divinatory context, and you can find it, for example, in Kitab al-Bulhan, which is a manuscript that dates to the mid-15th century, and that's at the Bodleian Library, and there's a great digitized version online. I think the inventory number is Oriental 133. If you wanna look it up, and you will find a similar illustration showing an old man on a character, and you even see, if I remember correctly, grapevine. So it's pretty, it's a pretty close rendition of the text of this particular tale. I have no idea how I'm doing with time. I still have 20 minutes? Okay, great. So that was the observations that I had about this particular manuscript. Now, what I wanted to do is switch to a manuscript that does not contain paintings. Thank you, Courtney. Just to elaborate a little bit, to briefly touch upon actually the idea that non-figurative modes of visual expression can also carry meaning and can also engage with the context of the manuscript. We've seen that images engage with the manuscript, with the text, with the genre. They inflect the genre, they emphasize certain generic qualities as opposed to others. But I believe that beyond painting, beyond figurative representations, that other codicological features actually also speak to the content of the manuscript. So this is a Persian manuscript, and it is dated. There is a colophon. There's a colophon somewhere here. Maybe I can show you later. But in any case, it's dated to 974 from the Hijri calendar, 1566, 1567. It's a copy of the Halname, the Book of Ecstasy, by the Persian poet Arifi, who was, I believe, active in the early 15th century at the court of the Timurid ruler Shah Rukh, the son of Timur, and he wrote this book. And the book basically, and this is really a very basic characterization, it's a mystical Metnawi. So Metnawi, as you can see here from this double page, is a poem with rhyming couplets. And in this case here, it's a mystical Metnawi. It's a Metnawi about mystical Sufi love, about the relationship between a lover and a beloved. So it's infused with Sufi erotic theology, and images are used to convey and elaborate on Sufi love, either abstract or narrative. In an abstract way, there's a whole thing about the bowl and the polo stick, which is a stock image of in Sufi poetry, such as, for example, similar to the moth and the candle, for example. But there's also a story about a dervish and a prince, and the prince is playing polo, and the dervish falls in love, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple layers here that serve to reflect upon the theme of mystical love. So if you look at this manuscript here, this is the first page of text on the right. There is an illuminated headpiece or title piece. There is no title here in this particular golden cartouche. This part is also known as Unwan or Sarlo. There is discussion about all of this. You also know that the text unfolds in a text box that has 2 columns of text, and in each column there is a misra', so the whole verse reads across both columns. You see that there's a restricted number of lines of text on each page, I believe something like 12 lines of text. The text is written in this script known as Stanek. And you also know that we have use of margins here that are decorated. And in this case, in this double page here, you have decorations that are outlined in gold. And I believe there is use of stenciling as well, which is a technique known as, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it looks like stenciling to me. Which is a technique that was known as X in the primary sources, by which one uses an intermediary sheet of paper and one either sprays the ground or the figure so that the motifs appear either negatively or positively. So you have all sorts of designs, mostly floral designs, scrolls of floral designs around the text in a symmetrical fashion. You have tinted paper, colored paper here, blue, obviously, and on the left hand page, you see that there are also animals such as birds here and here mingling with the vegetal elements. So what I wanted to say here basically is that this particular format which you see here, so the question is, how does this book relate to the content of Sufi poetry, right? Why this format? And the point that I would like to make, and it was made by a few scholars in the past decade, is that this particular features that you see here, so what we have here is a vertical elongated format for this book. It's a rather small book. So in other words, it's rather personal and intimate. It fits very well within open hands. The other major characteristic is the fact that the number of columns for the text is restricted to 2, whereas before the mid-14th century, we could find courtly manuscripts or manuscripts of this quality that had up to 6 columns of text, and that kind of format was used for epic and historiographical literature such as the Shahnameh. So basically what I'm trying to say is that around the mid-14th century, there is a shift in courtly productions from a large format that was more suitable for display manuscripts and monumental manuscript toward a more intimate format that focused on ghazal poetry and on lyrical poetry. So there is this shift in the format of the book that in fact accompanied a shift in interest in courtly cultures from the epic and historiographical genre, say, of the Shahnameh toward more, lyrical poetry, and that shift occurred around, under the Muzaffaris and the Jalayirids and mainly in cities like Shiraz. The other major characteristics, again, and it emerged around the same time in the mid-14th century, is the use of Nasta'liq, which is the script that you see here, which some scholars think developed out of Nasr, Nasr is a more rectilinear script that developed starting from the 10th century, and it looks a little heavier and stiffer, and it sits very well on the horizontal baseline of the text. Whereas in this case here, I don't know if you can see it, but some words follow oblique lines. There's a certain restlessness to this script, and some letters look like they are, you know, hanging or suspended as though they were hooked up from an invisible point situated at the upper right of the letter. I don't know if you all see this movement here. And scholars have shown, and in particular, I would like to quote Elaine Wright, that this script of Nasta'liq emerged in order to mimic the lyrical mood of the ghazal, the lyrical mood of the poetry that developed at during the 14th century, the 14th century being the century of Hafid. So Ellen Wright says that Nasta'liq, I quote, may well have been affected by the emotion and mood of the poem expressed through both its language and rhythm. And I could elaborate more about, you know, this equation between the sinuous line of the script here and the mood of the poem and the lyricism of the poem and the whole thing about love and all of that. And in fact, Persian poets did pick up on these analogies, and they did write about how the face of the beloved in particular looks like a page of calligraphy. And I could quote a verse by Hafid, but I might just go to another verse by a 14th century poet, I believe, from Herat, known as Maulana Ali Badr, and I quote the English translation. So this is an extract from a poem. The musky down on the camphor page of your cheek is a verse of beauty scriven. So this particular verse describes the face of the beloved, but uses the metaphor of writing and compares the face of the beloved as a page of calligraphy. So that I do believe that the page as we see it here, for example, with the curly twists of the Nasta'liq, which resembles the curly twist of the hair of the beloved, and the sheen of the paper, and the format of the page, I believe that all these features suggests that looking at a page of manuscript written in Nasta'liq and this kind of polished, highly burnished paper is an act that is similar to the act of gazing at the face of the beloved. So that was my second point. I have 5 minutes left, is my guess. So briefly, my third point and third manuscript was about a scientific manuscript. So moving away from the poetic to look at scientific productions and see whether or not art historians could say anything about this material. And let me open this book. It's from the Minassian collection, and the colophon confirms that it was made in Isfahan, I believe in the 18th century. And what we have here is a copy of the Tashrih Badani Insan, which means the anatomy of the human body, which is a text that was written in the mid-15th century but by Mahmoud ibn Ilyas, who was a physician from Shiraz. And I believe he did write this text as an illustrated treatise on the anatomy of the human body. And I believe he did include something like 6 plates, although he only mentions painting in one particular passage. But in any case, there are at least 70, I believe, illustrated manuscripts, copies of this particular text, which again was completed in the mid-15th century. And this text is considered by this particular tradition of books, this particular illustrated treatise is considered by some scholars as the first colored atlas of the human body. So this particular manuscript really replicates, belongs to that chain of manuscript that goes all the way back to the copy of Mansur ibn Ilyas. And I believe that the earliest illustrated copy that we have is dated to 1488. So in any case, this is the beginning of the manuscript. You note that it is written in Nasta'liq script and it is written in tinted paper. So we have here, you know, decorative book arts and the kind of scripts that were used not only for poetic manuscript, but also as it appears here for scientific manuscripts. And I can turn the, I'm gonna leaf through, and I believe that, so there are 5 or 6 books within these books, each one about a particular aspect of the human body. The first one is about bones. And this is the first diagram, and it's a diagram that shows the skeleton, so bones. I can keep leafing through. So the end of book 1, although I see المقالة الأولى في الآدم, so that's on bones. So the diagram sort of opens the section. And the next section, I believe, is about nerves. And we're gonna have, I think, a diagram showing the human body with nerves. Coming up soon, I promise. There we go. So this is, well, there would be a lot to wonder about in these with these diagrams, right? But I just wanted to briefly conclude with this matter. So those were the nerves, and then there were muscles. Although I'm seeing here in the text that we're skipping to veins. So we might be missing one section. I am not sure. Right, these might be veins. And the next section is on arteries, as you can see from the title on the left. And I believe that section is also illustrated here. And so these images are interesting for art historians because they say something about the diagrammatic nature of image making in that period, I believe. And so there would be, I think, would be extremely helpful and enriching to consider these images within an art historical history. And also these images, they draw not only in reality, as you can tell, but also on a tradition of images, and I believe they draw on Latin manuscripts that also had similar images starting from the 12th century. So there is a history of images here that is embedded in these diagrams. And last but not least, that scholars believe that this last diagram was actually the work of Mansour ibn Ilyas himself, and it's included in the section on compound organs. And it's a diagram that accompanies a short text on the formation of the fetus. And it shows, I believe it is in this version as well, and it shows a pregnant woman. Here it is. And this is the last diagram, usually the 6th figure included in these manuscripts.